so I know your niche very well. I've seen continuously the same issues arise, and our goal is to kind of address some of those big mistakes today, provide you some tools you can use effectively. There are a lot of food blogs in the world. I have tried repeatedly to get an accurate account. They're in the millions, and they continue to arise at a rate higher than the depreciation of the Canadian dollar. So it's one of those things where, there's a lot to take in from that. Hard to stand out with blogs. We have a lot of different kinds of food bloggers in the world. We have those who view it as a hobby. We have those who want to transition that hobby into a long-term money-making venture. And we have those that are there solely to pull together sponsorships, syndicated content. Sometimes they don't bother to provide attribution where it's necessary, and we try to combat that whenever possible, and we can do that effectively by doing some things correctly. Google doesn't care what your goal is for your blog. Google wants you to provide the best experience possible for its search audience, and it is getting tougher and tougher to get to the top of Google based upon them limiting the amount of search results they show. It used to be you get the nice 10 pretty blue links on the front page. Then they started introducing knowledge panel snippets. Then they started introducing increased local snippets. Then they started increasing app downloads on mobile. So right now it's very, very tough and very, very limited with regards to real estate on getting you ranked for that top banana cream cheese or banana pie recipe, regardless of what it is. It is much harder to rank in Google now than it was 3 years ago. You guys can do it though, and the reason you can do it is we're going to show you today some of the big problem areas, and we're going to show you how to correct those. This is what Google wants here. They want relevance. And that's really the most important thing to remember to take away from Google. Google wants a sweet spot. They want you to tell a story, but they want you to tell a story that connects with not only the audience of your blog, but of every other blog in the world, because it's so competitive. So we want to find that sweet spot in the middle there. We're going to talk today about relevance. And to Google, relevance is 5 areas, and I've listed those there for you. We're going to go over each of those today. We're going to talk about the meta tags and the data. We're going to talk about great content. Everyone is putting up great content. All of you in this room are putting up great content. Unfortunately, that is not enough. We're going to tell you how to position that great content effectively. We're going to talk about site appearance. We're going to talk about, most importantly, how you present on mobile devices, which is going to be, if not already, 70% of all of your traffic in 2016. We're going to talk about page speed. If you have 3 sites, all sites are equal. One site is faster than the other 2. That site is going to rank higher, period. It's very important. And then mobile optimization. As I mentioned, 70% of all your referrals in 2016 are going to be from a mobile or tablet device. That's a self-portrait of me in younger days. I still have the yellow jumpsuit. Meta tags and data. We all know about page titles. Page titles are super important. Here's an example from a conference I did earlier. That was an SEO conference. They had terrible title tags. And you can see that even if you're a perceived expert, or if you have a conference with a lot of other experts, you can make these simple mistakes. We always want to make sure that we're designing our titles with the fact that Google pretty much only displays about 60 to 65 characters. Okay, we can include longer stuff in there, but on a mobile device especially, those are all going to be truncated. So in many cases, the biggest mistake that those of you in the room make is including the name of your blog in the front of your title tag, or putting it at the end of your title tag, and it's very, very long. You do not need to do that. And the reason you don't need to do that is because your URL already qualifies to the audience who you are. So especially on your homepage, when that is extremely important for ranking consideration, one of the quickest changes you can make is to consider leaving off the name of your blog in your title tag. Use it instead to communicate effectively what your blog is about. If your blog is about gluten-free recipes, I should see gluten-free recipes at the very front of your blog. Very, very important. That is the single greatest thing you can do with your titles. Find your target keywords, find a selling USP, unique selling proposition, and communicate that effectively in your title right off of that. Same way with descriptions. Descriptions are very important. Google tends to rewrite descriptions, so if you do not fill that out, Google will pull up random stuff off your pages. It's not very attractive. Google will also display about 155 characters for your descriptions. We want those to be unique, we want those to be timely, and we want them to reflect the content on the page. There are plenty of tools out there that will allow you to quickly find and correct these deficiencies. This is an example of a tool at Moz. Moz is probably the most well-known tool suite operator in the world with regards to SEO and digital marketing. For about $99 a month, you can download and use a substantial amount of tools which most professional SEOs, including myself, use on a regular basis. So instead of you paying a lot of money for someone to do your marketing for you, you can use the Moz tools and quickly be able to identify a lot of these issues on your site yourself and fix them. Another great start, of course, is with Google Webmaster Tools. Google has the best information out there. How many of you, and again, I'm not going to embarrass anyone, but hopefully everyone in this room has their sites claimed and verified with Google Search Console, formerly Google Webmaster Tools? Everyone needs to do that. If not, see you in the hall after school. So again, very important is when we started on it, when I started on it, I'm always going to go first to Google Search Console. I'm going to find this information. If you're not familiar with how to best use Webmaster Tools, I've provided a simple link there for you. Take it out. There's a page there that has tutorials on it. Use the tutorials. Image optimization. This is a big deal. This is probably one of the fastest ways to gain an increased user experience. And by increased user experience, I mean get your sites to load much, much faster. The images are exactly the same. They look exactly the same in the browser. And yet you can see how very different they are in file size. Now, I've come across blogs where images have been 400 to 500 kilobytes, and there's been 5 or 6 of those in one pressing. And people wonder, why am I not doing that? And it's because the page is taking horribly long to load. And the biggest drag on those unlimited page speed resources is images. So here's an example of how basically what we want to do with your images is if you're not using something like Adobe Photoshop, save them for web, you want to download and use plugins, visual software. So we're going to get to that a little later. On-site optimization, kind of general takeaways here. Things that all of you in this room probably know. This is a review. These are the best practices, and I want you to kind of take these away from you, with you today. We talked about title tags. We talked about the need to custom meta description, filling out the alt tags and the title tags. All of you are probably aware of the fact that when you have an image, there are 2 fields there in WordPress. There's the alt field and there's the title field. Usually I try to replicate the alt field with the title tag. That's the simplest way to do it. One of those, especially the title tag, will appear within the embedded post of WordPress, showing what the image credit is. And you can use that for image credit, or you can use that for, just to have people, especially ABA accessibility, understand what the gist of that picture is. H1 tags, simple. A lot of this stuff, most of you should be using the SEO plugin. It does a lot of the heavy lifting on this stuff. Every post you have should have one H1 tag, never 2, never 3, always 1, and then you can have as many H2 to H5 tags as possible. Not a problem. And then, of course, we talked about the images. I'm a big believer in compressing outside of WordPress and then loading an optimized image in, and then letting a plugin compress it again, so that we can get as much of an optimized experience on the image as possible. Plugins like Tiny Compress Images, plugins like EWWW, Image Optimization, all use what's called compressionless optimization. Visually, you will never see a difference. It's all done in the back end, like pixels. It's very effective. Everyone should be doing it. We're going to talk about content, long-form evergreen content. Many of you are aware of this. If you've seen an increase at your end of top 50 cupcake recipes, or the 15 most awesome ways to make flawless bread, or a lot of these other link-bait type content, the reason you're seeing an increase in that is because it works. That kind of content is more easier to virally send, and and it allows you to stand out. And you can see that from a content creation standpoint, it's crowded. There is a substantial amount of posts. There is a substantial amount of new blogs registered. 1,500 blog posts every second in 60 seconds. 60 new blogs in WordPress. These are WordPress specific numbers actually. Every second or every minute. This has really only increased. This graphic is actually about 3 years old. So it's gone up. This just to give you an idea of how crowded the content creation marketplace really is. That is a lot of content to take in. The average user sees 285 content pieces every day. That is the equivalent of reading Gone with the Wind every day, or subjecting someone from the video aspect of making them watch the entire Twilight series every day. Who would want to do that? I wouldn't subject anyone to that. So, something to think about. Keeping your content classy, very, very important. When we talk about keeping your content classy, we're talking about correct practices on how you handle and syndicate your content. However, for us to understand how users are interacting with your content, we also have to understand correctly and use bounce rate. How many of you in this room have never heard of adjusted bounce rate? Please raise your hand.
Adjusted.
Fantastic. So adjusted bounce rate has been around since 2011 by Google. A lot of people do not realize that Google Analytics has an inherent deficiency built in, which prohibits you from actually calculating your bounce rate correctly unless you make some minor changes. This is where adjusted bounce rate comes in. I've provided some very quick ways that Google defines all the below as bounces. Clicking on the back button, closing a tab or a window, clicks on an external link. What if someone did all of that, but they previously spent 15 minutes on the recipe? To Google, that's a bounce. And to them, it would classify as a bounce immediately of 100%. That is not an accurate view of how users are interacting with your content. Why do you need an accurate view of how users are interacting with your content? So that you can see which recipes are performing the best, and then possibly replicate that with similar or related content pieces. To solve this, we use what's called adjusted bounce rate. I have successfully implemented this on some of the top blogs in your niche. Their bounce rates have dropped from 80+% to 20+%.
Wow.
And they are now more accurately able to calculate how users are navigating through their site. There are plugins that will do this for you. I've provided links to 2 of them. I've also provided a tutorial on EDR because I know it does seem kind of complicated. I can assure you it is not. Either of these plugins will work for you, and of course I always advise people to read the tutorial so they understand a little bit about how this is done. Content auditing, on-site duplicate content. We're not talking about off-site duplicate content yet. We're talking about on-site duplicate content. One of the things that bloggers tend to do in droves is fail to block tag pages, or fail to block archive pages, or maybe they fail to block paginated content. And those all lead to duplicated content issues. A tool like SiteLiner will easily allow you to surface those. It'll show you and compare each of your pages to one another and see if there's a lot of duplicated content roaming around on your site that you may be unaware of. To Google, they want you to be able to serve one uniform version of content. If you have 3 or 4 different ways to access a different piece of content, that's going to lower the relevancy of that unique blog post. We want to correct that, and SiteLiner is a great tool to do that with. I know many of you are familiar with Copyscape, which is a substantially effective tool for off-site plagiarism combating. We want to be able to see who has reprinted your recipes. We want to be able to set up alerts. Copyscape allows you to do this very effectively so that you can send out your DMCA requests. I recommend, if you can, to sign up and use CopySentry. CopySentry is a service that does the heavy lifting for you. It allows you to enter your most popular recipes, and it will scour the web for you and let you know by alerts if someone has reprinted this somewhere else, so that you can take a proactive stance in combating that if possible. Content auditing. Is your content fit? Very simple things to think of. Bless you. Very simple things to think of. Is the content quality in long form? I have seen cases where recipes have been published that really The instructions were okay, but there really wasn't any sort of a story attached to it. It was some instructions, a title, and some pictures. And that, to me, is not a quality recipe. That's not a quality piece of content that will allow you to stand out in the 10 to 15,000 recipes that are going to be published every day. Always ask of your content, does this fulfill a need? Does this answer a question? Is it easy to share? A lot of you have really done an exceptional job with the sharing plugins, and that's great. You want to be able to share this on Pinterest, especially super important. Continue doing that. Also want to make sure the content is generating positive metrics. That's where really the Google Analytics comes into play. If you can put in your recipes in Google Analytics and see that it's generating low bounce rates, long time on-site average visits, that's the kind of content that you want to replicate going forward. I know many of you have heard of Panda. Panda has hurt a lot of people online in your niche, several people in this room. Understanding how Panda works is very important. Honestly, it really hasn't changed since it was introduced in 2011. How many people have actually read the 23 questions that Google provides as to how Panda works? Did anyone know that exists? So here's a link, and basically they're just questions that all of you should be asking of your content. So Panda is an algorithmic. For those of you who are not familiar with Panda, I can briefly tell you that Panda is an algorithmic penalty put forth by Google back in 2011 that targets low, thin, quality content on your site. Panda is a site-wide algorithm. In other words, if you have only a couple recipes that may qualify or trigger Panda, it affects your entire domain. This was a recent revelation by Google. Many people, many penalty auditors, myself included, had thought for years that this was a page-specific algorithm. Well, Google just hadn't bothered to tell us correctly, but it's not, it's site-wide. So just removing, we really want to do a complete audit. Many of you in the room who have had audits with myself or others have done a substantial job, great job of doing content audits where you found the lowest performing recipes on your site, things that clearly didn't resonate with your audience, and you've removed them. You've yanked them from your site, or maybe you've republished those. And that's one of the ways you would combat Panda. Making sure that your content is as high quality as possible. What do we do about bad content when we find it? There are a couple different ways to approach that. We always want to rewrite the content first. I always recommend that if you have popular recipes that you update or refresh those on a regular basis. Many people in this room have 1, 2, 3, or 4 recipes that account for a substantial amount of the traffic, especially on a monthly basis. So we always want to look at making sure that those recipes are current, up to date. If you can rewrite the content, or if you find that it's just outdated, let's throw and redirect it to better related content. You can do that easily within a redirection plugin within WordPress. I will talk about the redirection plugin on the next slide. Or we can no-index the content by a robust text file. Maybe you just want to leave it on the site because it has affiliate links, or maybe you have a commitment that you have to honor. Or we can just block it from the search engines. The last recourse is always the 404 or 410. We don't want to leave these errors on your site because they inhibit and affect user experience. What do we do about syndicated content? Well, there's some various ways to approach that. We always want to use the rel canonical tag, which again, if you're using Yoast, is automatic. Every time you publish a post, it automatically sets up the rel canonical tag for you. Maybe we no-index the article. If people find that they, if people want to use your content, the number one thing that you ask of them is that they use a rel canonical tag, which points back to you, the original author. Most people just won't do that. They just want to do it. It's too complicated for them. Instead, you want to go to the probably 3 or 4. Get an attribution link back to you. The problem is when you're using larger sites like the Huffington Post. Many examples exist where very well-known bloggers have reprinted word for word their best recipes on the Huffington Post. And the Huffington Post article has completely replaced their original recipe in the search results. You do not want to have that happen. Do not syndicate your content with very large conglomerate sites. They will outrank you. Google says that it doesn't happen. It happens all the time. I'm doing audits all the time. I see it. We don't want to have that happen. You want to police your content. Your best content goes on your domain. If you want to write a column for the Huffington Post, write original content. and then use that content to link back to your original, to link back to your blog. Don't build up Huffington Post. They don't need your content. They don't care about you as a person. They want the traffic. Don't give them your traffic. Many of you might know Rand Fishkin, CEO of Moz, very well-known SEO. He had an exceptional Whiteboard Friday just a couple weeks ago. It's well worth you taking a look at it. It's all about the process that Google refers to it as Query Deserves Freshness, QDF, also known as the Freshness Update. It's been around since about 2011 as well. And Google likes content that looks fresh. If I've got 2 banana cream pie recipes and one was published in 2011, and I've got another one here that was just published, Google's going to tend to treat the one that was recently published a little higher and a little better in the search results because of the freshness factor. So that is also why many of you in the audience may want to take a hard look at removing dates from your URLs. When you have dates in your URLs, it subconsciously makes your content look dated. Instead, you just have the date on the page. Even if it's a redirect, it's fine. Google processes their own redirects fully and usually without hesitation these days. So my advice to you is if you are looking at doing a redesign or if you're currently using dates in your URLs, it's something to think about because the content will look more future-proofed. That's the term, future-proof. We want your URLs to look now and function now as well as they will in 10 to 15 years. Site attractive, how you look online, very important. This is not good. We do not want you to do this with your ads. We do not want to have content, an ad, and then more content. This will get you in trouble with what are called Google quality raters, who are thousands and thousands and thousands of mostly college students who are paid by Google to browse the internet and individually grade web pages, the feedback of which is used to refine Google algorithms. This is one of the things they look at. Don't do excessive ads. Not a big fan of site-wide external image ads. I'm not a big fan of design by ads or design by links on the footer. I don't have anything against Footy Pro. I don't have anything against sponsored Genesis blogs. They're great, but they do not need your links. If you have this on every one of your pages of your site, that's a followed link to them. All you're doing is you're bleeding your page rank, you're bleeding your authority. We want to conserve that authority. We want to conserve that authority internally so that it flows effectively and fully to your current blog content. This is a very simple fix. That one down there below, the Daily Mail, that is like 11 links. And this is an auditor that we just did an audit for, had this on every one of the pages of their site. That is a lot of authority flowing out of their site to someone who doesn't need that authority. So be judicious. Be selective. You do not need to give away your authority. Canonical issues. A lot of you, I understand and know and understand the fact that www and non-www are completely different sites. We want to consolidate and make sure that the visitors in Google are only able to access your site from one path. I'm always surprised. Let me correct that. When I've done an audit, I tend to share what's called a sneak peek. This is a free user test that anyone can do. And this user test allows a random person who has never experienced your site to go and take a look at it, and they will record their experience for 5 or 10 minutes. So that you can get physical feedback from someone randomly how they interact with your site. And you would be shocked at what is found on some of these. Here is an example. And again, Food Blogger Canada has a fantastic site. Nothing wrong with the site at all. But basically, if you were to do the sneak peek right there, I did 3 of them. And the feedback, there was one piece of negative feedback on all 3. And the reason was they're mobile. If you pull up the site on mobile, all you're seeing is boxes on their homepage. And it does not connect design-wise or seamlessly with the actual blog post themselves when they click through. And again, it's just a visual thing. It's something that everyone who did the sneak peek noticed and thought enough to note when they were doing it. Other than that, the site performed well. It was designed well overall. It loaded fast. And it was attractive. Use these sneak peeks. Use Peak. They're cheap. They're free. You can get 3 a month for free. Use them on your current audience. Use them on your sites, especially on mobile. See what people are seeing, and then you can attract and correct accordingly. Back to Google Webmaster Tools, and now known as Google Search Console. We always want to correct crawl errors. Super, super important. Google is providing plenty of information on crawl errors. Crawl errors are single-handedly the thing that probably everyone in this room has experienced. You probably have dozens, if not hundreds, of these errors sitting in your Google Webmaster Tools account. These are Google telling you, hey, I'm providing you this information for a reason. I want you to correct it. They enhance, or in many cases, inhibit user experience. I want you to take a look in your accounts, if not today, not tomorrow, Monday, and see if you've got one of these. Google sent these out on Friday. I know because I created this slide on Friday when I got here because it's such a big deal. Google is now sending out specific warnings to verified sites about 404 errors on smartphones. This is a big deal, so you do want to correct this stuff. Take a look at this. Follow the advices. Google provides you detailed steps to correct this. How do you correct it? Well, I recommend a specific plugin. It's called Redirection for WordPress. Redirection. If you're on another program or another site like Squarespace, or if you're using, Blogspot or Blogger, those are things you have to contact directly to work with. Now, Squarespace provides plugins and management so that you can do a lot of this stuff. But you want to make sure that you have a URL mapping plugin, something that will allow them to map your entire site. I've provided a tutorial here for the redirection plugin so that you can easily find out how to use the plugin effectively and how to use it to find, surface, and correct all these 404s. Fetch and Render Tool. This is a fantastic tool in Google Webmaster Tools. Google actually sent out notices earlier this summer about if you couldn't fully render your site, or if you had a partial render, that could affect how your site was served algorithmically. And by partial render, that means maybe you had mistakenly blocked WP includes, which is a very popular folder. Maybe you had mistakenly blocked